Hello all, and you're very welcome to this little tutorial that I would like to put out about what the August Challenge is all about. It's coming up in August, as you can imagine, and I have a few little thoughts that I would like to put out about it and to explain what is involved in it. So the August Challenge is open to all. 2 images. The first image a macro of a flower or insect taken in colour, and the second image a landscape in black and white or monochromes. If possible, to have the images taken in July and August. The idea of the challenge is that we put out the challenge and you go out and you shoot it. But not absolutely necessary. You may have something from the past that's quite acceptable to exhibit or put up for as an image. It doesn't really have to be done in July and August, but preferably. All right, we're trying to be nice to you, but we'd also try not to have it within that for your own advantage. Submit using the portal of the Anoiga Photographic Group's website. It's on the site. There's a menu button called Photo Challenge. Include with the name, your own name first, please, with your name coming before any other information on the file name, if it's possible. If you're sending it in off a telephone or off a tablet, it may not be possible to do this. But if it can, put your name up first. Sometimes pieces of software only just gives the beginning of the file name, and the name is the important one for us when we are sorting it out. Images for uploading not to exceed 10 megabytes, because we don't want huge images for downloading and for putting up on live streams and whatever. So 10 megabytes is more than adequate. If you have difficulty, get on to us and we will give you another way of getting it up, or we will show you how to download it. Not download, but to downsize. We have some tutorials up about that in the past. If you have difficulty, contact us. You can submit your entries up to Thursday, the 20th of August at 12 o'clock, and it goes to that. The domain's name is for the photographic group's website is here. So the 24th and 25th of August, on the same website, you can put in your scoring for each one of the images in your mind is worth. It's a very good exercise because it makes you look at the image and say to yourself what you like and what you dislike about it, and then you can put a score down on it. On Wednesday the 26th, we will have a live stream with judges' comments about what they thought about the images and maybe suggestions for improving. The top score from our scoring system will go onto the homepage of our website and into our Instagram account. If you want to get to our website, you can use this QR code, putting it up nice big on the screen for you, and just point your camera towards it of your phone, and if you've got the app, it will bring you directly to the website. Now, when we are coming to do the landscape photography, it suits in very well with the exposure of compensation, which we've been doing on our live streams earlier. The portion of the triangle of exposure that we're going to be involved with on this exercise is the aperture end, which is the size of the hole the light passes through, and we're going to be working with it. We've tutorials done on this before from our live streams, and you can go back and you can see this in much greater detail. I'm just going through very, very quickly as a refresher and an introduction to other people. The ISO will come into play as well. You can either set it to automatic, will probably work most of the way through. It's only when you become to the very small apertures, sometimes you have to pop up the ISO in order for it to work, depending upon how bright or dark the day that you're working with. Right, and the aperture has got to do with aperture priority. So when you're taking these photographs, you can use automatic. I would obviously prefer you to use program because it gives you more options. If you're not going to use that, you may have options on your phone for presets, and one of the presets is called landscape, which is really a variation on aperture priority. But if you know what's going on in aperture priority, it's a much better way of doing it, and it's the more intermediate advanced way of taking landscape, because a landscape allows and gives you time to be able to put all of these settings into action. So the aperture is the bigger the hole, the more light that can pass through. This is the aperture where the light passes through the camera. So, and it's written off in F numbers. So the smaller the number, the bigger the hole. So F22 is a very small hole. F2.8 is a very big hole. All right. Hole, I say, is or aperture would be the correct word. I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. Then the smaller the hole, the bigger the number, the more of the image that will be in focus. This has got what we're talking about, depth of field, right? So what you're looking for is to use the f22, 16 or 11. Now I know on some of your cameras it doesn't go beyond 8. 8 is the smallest aperture that you have, so then you have to work with the 8, f8. You saw this before, and it's got the idea of triangle of exposure as well. We're working with this bit here up on top, the apertures. This case is giving a whole load of them from f1.4 to 32. My camera ends at 22 and starts at 4. Well, it's your lens more so than your camera. And your camera may be different, but you will have a range of these. And what they do is, as the hole or the aperture is bigger, less of the photograph is in focus. The person is in focus, but the background isn't, if focused on the person. And at the other end at f32 or 22 or whatever, the person and the background is in focus. So that's called depth of field. So in landscape photography and in macro photography, you want to get as much of the image into focus as you possibly can, from the foreground to the background. Normally, sometimes you may not want to, and that will, you have control over that. So when we're doing our settings for doing our landscape, and I find this a confusing area, and they are two first cousins of one another and very, very confusing. I'm talking about focus, the settings on your camera for focusing, right? And they're all called by different names and different setups and different symbols and all sorts of things. But generally speaking, they are all do the same sort of job. So when you are taking photographs for a landscape, I suggest spot focusing to be your best option. Or in the old days, we used to use manual focusing, and there's nothing wrong with manual focusing. When I'm doing landscape, what I often do is I set it to spot focusing, decide upon the spot I want to have in focus, and turn off the autofocus then afterwards, which means it's focused on that particular spot. Don't forget to turn on your autofocusing again when you move away from this subject. So that's the one that I suggest. You can also use the pattern or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. Now that's the sensor in your camera that determines which part of the photograph is in focus, not to be confused with the exposure metering. That is the amount of light that the camera is reading. When you're using aperture priority, you set the aperture and the camera does everything else with these settings. Very similar type names, which is very confusing. Now in this case, I would suggest the multi or the pattern one is probably the best one, not the spot, because the spot would only be giving you the exposure in one particular part of your landscape. You can use it. There's no problem if you want to create a particular effect, but just for simplicity's sake, go for the pattern or the multi one, and the spot focusing, not spot metering. Be very, very careful between the two of them. I can understand how one can get confused about them. I've often got confused about them myself, even when I'm doing the tutorials. Now, the other part to take into consideration is the lens. Now let's say we're using telephoto lenses that go from wide angle into telephoto. So you've got wide angle down here at 14, and then the long telephoto lens giving you about 600 millimeters, or whatever your camera does. Now they all give different effects to your landscape. A wide angle one will always give you much more depth of field than the zoomed type one, the longer lens. It will also affect the perspective of the photograph, and this can be used to your advantage when you are taking a photograph. So quite an interesting part of the technicalities of what is going on. Now, this is a chart that we had from our live stream as well, from the past. I'm going to go through it again. There are 3 different circumstances that this depth of field changes and gives you different results. The first one and the simplest one to go with is to go with different apertures, from a wide open aperture of f2 to a very small aperture of f16. Obviously the one in the middle is the one in the middle. Now all of the point you are focusing on by manual or by spot focusing, whatever, is all at the same distance, right? That is called the hyperfocal distance. So you focus on that distance. So if you have a relatively good distance away from you, you're using a small aperture, you will have a good bit in front and a good bit behind in focus. Normally it's 1/3 of the distance in front and 2/3 of the distance behind. Then the next version is if you go to the very small aperture, it has got a very small depth of field because very little in front and then 2/3 behind as well. That can be used if you want to take a photograph of a person against the background and you want the background to be out of focus. That's where you'll be using aperture priority. We're using aperture priority in a landscape type environment where you want to have it from the foreground to the background in focus. So that's the normal way that we would look at depth of field. There's also other variations, different distances from the camera. The closer the hyperfocal distance is, or the distance that you are focusing, the less the depth of field is. The further away it is, the greater it is. So that's another variation. You've got something much closer, as in macro, the depth of field falls off and you see that effect, and that's the reason for it, because you are in close. If you use different focal lengths of your cameras, like from the wide angle of a 28 to the telephoto of 135, see the way the depth of field changes as well. As I was saying earlier on, the larger wide angle lens gives a much greater depth of field. It also spreads things out more. That's why auctioneers like to use it when they're photographing rooms. It makes them look much bigger. So I set up a photograph out in the back garden to prove or to talk about this to you. So I laid out 3 chairs. This is taken with a wide angle shot to show you the setup. Because it is taken from an angle, it looks like they are equally spaced. But that's an optical illusion. That's not what's actually the case. That is 1/3 of that distance from there to there is 2/3 of the distance from there to there. But because it's taken with a wide angle lens, it has changed the perspective, and we can use this to our advantage and disadvantage when we are taking photographs. For this to show correctly, I'd want to go into my neighbour's garden and shoot straight in to show the variation on it. So I started off taking these sample photographs for you. And lo and behold, when I looked at the camera and I went to put it on the laptop to get it organised for this slideshow, they looked very dark. Had a look at them in Photoshop for their histograms and they were way off. So I says, what's gone wrong? So I went back, and you've all had this problem. I looked at the camera and it was doing this usual thing. It was set for exposure compensation of -1. No wonder they were so dark. And if I'd been smart enough and intelligent enough at the time of shooting to have a look at the back of the camera and look at the histogram that went with the image as it was being taken, the histogram is all off to one side. And that should have been a warning sign to me. When we are shooting landscape, we can work off tripod, we can work slower, we can look at these sort of things. We're not, unless we're waiting for something to come into the shot and come back out of it. But to get these things set up, we can see. So that's where I went back and I reshot and I put it to 0. And the histogram moved across a little bit better, and I said I think it needs to go a little bit further, so I put it to +1 so that I will be getting the histogram in the right spot on the screen, which is what I should have done in the first place. So we all learn much more by our mistakes, and if we go to give a tutorial or whatever, we learn even more because we make the mistakes while we're preparing the photographs ourselves for the image. So we went off and I shot them. This is the setup for the way I want. This is shot at f4. As you can see, it's a telephoto type lens. It's at its full extension, which means the depth of field is shallow anyway. So it is is focused on this chair and it is in focus. It's f4. f4 is the largest aperture that's on my camera. I don't have any on the lens, should I say. It doesn't go any bigger than that. So you can see the foreground and the background is out of focus. So we move on to the next one, 5.6. Similar, it's improving a little bit. f8 improving a little bit, getting more focus in here. f11 greatly improved. You almost got it in here into focus, and the background is quite good. And then when you get to f16, even better, is getting much more detail here. And then my last one was f22, and it's sharp from the foreground to the background. Right, you can see all these flowers coming in here and much sharper. So if I went back to the first version, I had the f4. See how much it is. So that's what you would be if you want to photograph a person with a blurred background. And then the other one was if you want to do a landscape where you want to have it all in focus from foreground to background. So that's when you go to do your, it's called depth of field. The aperture controls the amount of light that comes in through the lens. We can also use it to control the amount of the photograph that appears to be sharp or in focus. By varying the aperture, we can make the background go blurry or to remain as sharp as the main subject in the picture. This is generally called depth of field. And that's what we have been talking about when we use aperture priority. Now remember, there are technicalities in this, and make sure that when you go and you're using those really small apertures that you have enough light, because very little light is coming in through the lens. So if you haven't got enough light coming from the sun, remember to pop up the ISO on your camera so you can get a little bit more light or more sensitivity into your image. Now, when you go to take your photographs for landscape, you will have your camera set at different ratios of 4:3 or 3:2, or indeed 16:9. Now, we've always been using the 4:3 or the 3:2 ratios, but when we go into this digital world and it comes up on screen, the screen is 16:9 in ratio, so we're not using both sides. That's fine if that's what we want. But remember, there's image could be out here that we are not using. Then you've got the square one, which is a square. That works very well if you're shooting only for Instagram. So if you notice the stuff that goes up onto Instagram, we do have to cheat it at times to make it look right. And very often we just pick it as a square version. It's just the way the Instagram system works. It's exactly the same attitude as what Hasselblad had. They always had square photographs and reckoned their camera was always to be square. And the old Rolleiflex patch. So that's the 16:9 ratio, where you can set that on your camera or on your phone will give you that ratio. And I think if it's there, we should use it. And I think for landscape especially, it is quite, because that's the new format. We've been all used to the old formats in size. And this is a photograph that was taken when I took on a phone for a landscape, and in a few minutes I'm going to show you how we convert this into black and white and how the different bits and pieces are done in Photoshop. But last night I had a guest speaker and we interviewed them talking about macro photography. So let's have a listen to what they had to say. Well, we have a guest speaker along with us tonight, a guest to talk to us about macro photography. I've been looking at some of your photographs, Mary, in the macro world, and they really look well. What are your tricks? How do you do it so well?
Oh, thank you, Peter. I don't think I do it so well, but I do my best. What I find for the macro, the phone seems to give me the best pictures, the camera phone. And yeah, I try on both, and I usually find they come out better taken on the phone. I think everybody has one of these now.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the phone because there's so much, and the new phones that are coming along the scene are even more impressive. But one thing I notice about the phones is that it's really start on TV is starting to introduce the 16:9 ratio. That's that type of a ratio, and I noticed in the last shot that you put in with the macro one, the color one in last month's challenge, that it was the full 16:9 ratio, and it really seemed to fill the screen. Is that one of the advantages of the phone, or do you have any
Uh,
views on that?
yeah, well, it was all right for that one, but very often the macro pictures, um, the square image or maybe the 8 by 12 seems nicer. Very often I do flower photography,
And
and for that I take them on the phone and then crop them in photo
do
elements.
you bring it? Yes, you bring it from the phone into Elements. That's a very good, because every image needs to be done. Now you can do quite an amount in the phone as well, or indeed on a tablet. But
Yeah,
taking it to
I use Snapseed, but I find them very hard to download.
yeah, for which the images from or the software.
No, I can work on Snapseed and it's very useful and it changes them very nicely. But I find it very hard then to download them.
Oh,
They're I can look at them on the phone, but I've difficulty say putting them up on the laptop or
yeah, there's always issues. There's always issues, especially if you're using a piece of software that has come free. They keep on putting little twists into it to make you pay for a piece of software. No, but it is the way things are going, and it's a very interesting. So, Mary, I think what we'll do is we will have a look at those lovely images that you have sent in to us, and we'll find out what it was that you were using to create these images. This one there's what I was saying again, the 16:9 ratio used in a vertical format. I like that
yeah.
shot. Beautiful lighting. How did you do that one?
Well, that was in Italy, and yeah, the light there was very good, and yeah, you would always have the phone with you. You mightn't be going out to take pictures, but you would always have the camera phone.
Yeah, lighting is super in that one, and the background is. I often find less is more, and in your images it seems to be a lot of less being an awful lot more. Yeah, it's the texture. I suppose lighting is the all important. How do you cope with wind?
It was a very calm day there
Yeah,
last year in Italy.
yeah, that's a lovely, lovely shot. I like that one. Now, this one I think is stunning. And here we are using a different format again, the square format. This would be super on Instagram because, like, Instagram are always square. And of course, the old-fashioned Hasselblad in the past was square. Do you like square?
Well, for that particular image, I think it was the best. It was cropped. I took it again on the phone and probably the old 8 by 12, but I thought it looked better in the square shape.
Mm. And there are so few colours in that makes it very, very strong. And there's a lovely sweep to it. And I think it's an example. And the detail is very good. How do you manage to get of course, the brighter the light, the more depth of field you'll be having in it. But you've got great detail all around on that, in that image. Let's see what this one is. This was really difficult. This is very, very small and in very close. How did you manage this one?
I think I may have taken that with the camera. It's a good while ago, and I took the full insect, and I don't like the look of it, but I remember seeing that one morning on the patio, and the sun was shining on the shell,
Mm.
and beautiful colours.
The one thing about composition, this type of a spiral type shape is very much sought after in composition, and you have it there in the snail, which kind of makes it a very interesting shot with nice texture in it as well. Now this one, very interesting. Shoot first and ask questions later. Fast moving objects.
Ah, no, I don't think so. These guys move very slowly.
Mm.
That was in the Botanic Gardens a couple of years ago, and I'd say it was on the camera.
Yes, yes. Of course, you could use it on the camera. You could be using a telephoto to bring it in close. It's a lovely shot. This one again, that square format, which got minimum number of colours, the lobelia around the outside. Normally we'd be giving out about bits and pieces, but I think that really adds to it. Kind of makes it like a magical place. Where did you take this, and what was your ideas behind it?
I can't remember where I took it, but yeah, I like the lobelia around it myself. The blue.
It's almost like a rainbow. Richard of York gave battle in vain. It's kind of almost following the colours of the rainbow in lots of ways. Yeah, that is a lovely, lovely shot. So now, Mary, what would be your advice to the people who are going out for the August challenge and are going to be taking their photographs of their macro photographs? What would you suggest to them for success? What are your ideas?
Well, I think a lot of them wouldn't be looking for my advice, but for those who might, it might be useful to. I would recommend using the phone. I've been very pleased with pictures I got from the phone. Even the one in the profile photo of the lighthouse, that was taken with the phone on a hike one day.
Yeah.
So I find definitely for the macro, the phone is the best. Yeah, for me anyway.
I also think with yourself, you seem to be operating that less is more when you're doing macro.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Unless, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way you. Well, Mary, that has been a very interesting little discussion, and I would like to thank you most sincerely, because it's not an easy job to come on to one of these things and talk. But we will be having other people along later on, so we're going through the Marys at present, right?
Well, goodbye everybody, and thank you very much for asking me.
That's no problem. We'll be asking loads of people as we go along, and that was quite impressive, and I was very, very pleased that Mary came along and did that interview with us. It is quite a challenging job to do, and I am very thankful to anyone who comes along and puts themselves forward. It is not an easy task, and I have great appreciation and admiration for Mary for doing it, and indeed Mary last week as well, Mary Gary, and we've also had Barney to come along and talk to us. So if anybody else would like to come along and give a little talk like that, I would love to have somebody else along, because I'm sure you're browned off looking at me. We tried to do it without too many things going wrong, but we do things so well here, we do it twice sometimes, and that one wasn't too bad. We didn't miss out on anything on that one, but when we were finished, we got talking again, and Mary thought of something that she should have mentioned during our little discussion, and she had forgotten about. So we came back and we recorded it as well. Now, as we were, Mary, you were showing us there the way you were taking your photographs. We forgot to put this into the actual video itself. This is an after take, all right? So you were just mentioning it to us, how you hold the phone when you're taking your photographs.
Yeah, this is part of, you get this with the selfie stick. And, you know, it's hard to hold the selfie stick and take the photographs and steady, but I found out that this can be screwed onto the tripod.
Do you ever have difficulty when you're using the camera to see the image on the screen because it's so bright?
No, not with any of those, no.
No, because you're working in close. Your own body will create a shade as well for it.
Well, that's the problem. You could very easily put shade on the flower or whatever.
But it'll also block the light getting at the screen, the really bright light. No, it was worth putting that little bit extra in at the end. I don't have great facilities for editing videos and whatever, so we just try and do it as live as we can. If we were to spend a lot of time editing, we could spend hours and hours, and it's more important to get the content out. Once again, many, many thanks to Mary. I look forward to those of you who will be coming in the weeks and months to come, hopefully, with more of these little interviews on your particular subject. Let me know what you'd like to talk about. So earlier on, I was saying that I would talk to you about converting your photographs to black and white and what to do on your laptop. So I have that set up now, and we'll have a look at it. So this is the image that we're going to play with. I've taken this on my phone, and it is 16 by 9 because that's what the phone was set for. Now, let's assume that this is the landscape that you're going to go for. And on your camera, you can turn on your lines, so your divisions, your thirds that come up on it, and this appears on your camera. Now, they're a great help when you're going to do landscape, because you can use it as a guide to where your centre of interest should be. Now, I know these are rules, but they're a very good starting point, and you won't go too far wrong if you actually use the rules. And they've been proven that they do work. Now, you can come along and you can break them if you want. That's no problem. But the basic idea is that the strongest points of the photograph are where these lines are. Horizons are meant to be kind of maybe on one of these thirds, which is good in that respect. Centre of interest are better positioned in where they intersect. So obviously the centre of interest here are these people. So when you were in the real world taking this photograph, you could have moved yourself around and positioned the people maybe onto one of these little thirds. Okay, so let's say we go for, I think he'd like maybe to be about somewhere about, we want to get the horizon as well, get the horizon to fall on one of the thirds and get him on the intersection. So that's what we have there. So we say yes to that. When you say that, yeah, that's fine. But you've got big white bits out here. Okay, you could just do the crop as is. That's no problem. You could do that. Or what you've often seen me do in tutorials is nice little quick handy way. Sky is sky is sky. So you take whoop, that wasn't quite right. Go for this tool here. Whoop. The marquee tool, rectangular. And I put it down here, sky is sky is sky, and I bring it across as far as here. Then I right click on it and I layer via copy. Okay, I'll bring up the layers palette so you can see the layers here. You can see the second layer is there. And you then get your move tool. This one here is the move tool, this one up here in the top left hand corner. Or if you put the V key on your keyboard will also do it. You put that there and pull the sky up. Sky is sky is sky. Okay, now there's a bit missing over here as well. So what we'll do over there is we'll put some of this C over there. So now in order to have all that one image, you have to flatten it. So you go here and you can use merge down, merge visible or flatten image. They'll all do exactly the same thing. Now it's only just one layer. Do the same thing again with the marquee tool. But this time we're going to be working on the C here at the side. Right click, layer via copy. Hit your V key again or your move key up here, whichever you want. Makes it like this and you pull it all the way out. Now it's so on the script that you really don't realize that that's not for real. So then you come here and you flatten again, so you only have one image to be working with. So that's your new image. You can say to yourself, I don't like the 16 by 9 and that I think there's too much going out on this side. Crop away, tear away, because it's purely subjective. So when I go to convert to black and white, my preferred system is image, adjustments, gradient map, and you come into this gradient map, grayscale mapping. If it doesn't come up, if you double click on this here, it shows you all of these other ones that are available. We just want that one, so we say OK to it. Now we're in black and white. The next thing we will do at this time is to bring up our levels. The keyboard shortcut is Control and L. All right, and we see our histogram coming up. Our image adjust levels is the go this way. And you can see that the histogram is a little bit off to one side, so there's plenty of movement to pull it in there, and see how that just pops up just a little bit. Going too far in there, you're going to lose detail. So you can only go as far as where the mountain starts, and then go into the center, and you can brighten or you can darken. You can go wherever you reckon it should be. Let's say about there. So that's where so now we have come from going to history. That's where we started at. And that's now where we are. So we've moved the people around. We could have moved those people around when we were shooting them at the beginning. And that would have been a more, a better time to actually have done. So what else can we do to this photograph to improve it? Well, what I often do is I go in here into the dodge tool, because we used to use this when we were in the darkroom, and I just lighten up where our center of interest is going to be, and I put a little bit of highlight in, just to brighten it up in certain spots, to give it a little bit of life. Maybe here on these bits of waves here, just to get it to be a bit more punchier. Okay, now you can play away at your heart's content doing this for a good while, and then you go to your burn tool, and I always like to have the corners especially darkened down a little bit on the top, and especially here on the side, because that little bit of darkness holds your eye into the photograph. And then the last move that you would do, you'd have a look at the cropping again. If you look at the horizon, is not actually level, so you can put it here, and you can square up the horizon so it's not flowing out, and say yes to that. And there's your finished image. So it came from that to that. Now you can play around yourself and do all sorts of things to it, and you can get various results. Now you don't have to go that way. There's loads of other ways you can go. You can go to make it into black and white image, adjust again, and it has down here hue and saturation, and if you desaturate it, it goes black and white, and you can lighten and darken that as well. You can, but I still prefer my one. I think the gradient map is my preferred one. The other way you can do it is image, adjustment, and there's one here called black and white, and that's a very good one as well, because it allows you to make the red part of the photograph darker. If you want to go for the red, well, obviously the blue sky is a part of this photograph, so if you go to that, you'll be mainly going into the blue of the sky and the blue of the sea, right? And you can play around there. This one I like, tint, right, like sepia tone, right? And then here for the saturation of the sepia tone, you can have it a very dark sepia tone or a very light sepia tone. We did say monochrome, so that's one color. You could also have it in any other color you like, greens or blues or whatever. The choice is endless, and that's the way that you can do that. Now, let's say for argument's sake, let's go back. Where were we? That was our photograph that we were working with the black and white. And let's say for argument's sake that it wasn't a 16:9, it was a different ratio. Let's say, turn that around the other way. Let's say it was that sort of a ratio, which works quite well as well, doesn't it? We can put a third there. So we just, for the sake of argument, we say that's what that's your shape of your photograph, right? And you're going to be exhibiting it for show in on the portal. It's going to be appearing on the screen as 16:9. So in the earlier one, there will be 2 gaps at either side. There's nothing stopping you doing this. Go File, New, and create a new blank. 16 inches by 9 inches, 16:9 ratio, with a white background because it's a black and white photograph. With a colour, you could go with a colour for your colour photograph, and you create a new. Okay, so put the 2 of them beside one another. Okay, that's the image that we have, and that's the shape. It's going to be shown when it comes to the to be shown on the screen. You can take this by putting the two photographs on the screen at the one time and the new one. Get your move tool, which is the V tool, V shortcut, put it on the image and throw it straight in here. Okay, now we'll get rid of this now because it'll be in our way. Don't save don't save the changes. Let it go away. And you can put that anywhere on this card you want to, because that's the way it's going to be appearing. You could even put it like that if you wanted to, like we used to be doing in our mounting days. Then you can get the marquee tool again, and you can put it wherever you want to. Put it around the photograph. Right click, but this time stroke. And you can change your color here, change the size of the stroke, say OK to it. And now you have a line. Take the line away by Control D or deselect, and see how you're building up a nice, interesting image to be shown on in the system. Now, you don't have to do that, but that is a doable option for you. Right then, folks. Well, that was some of my suggestions for you to go with. Oh. No, so there were my few suggestions for you to go with for the live stream, and not for live stream, but for your competition. Put something in. You don't have to win. Exhibiting and learning the technology and playing around with this technology is great fun, and that's what we should be aiming for. So get your images in. If anybody has any trouble, let me know. These are only suggestions. You may have your own suggestions as well. Send them to us. We're all at the start of this learning curve, and we look forward to seeing you again shortly in our next tutorial, but especially on the live stream when we see all the images that you put in. Wishing you all the best of luck. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the live stream or on the next tutorial. Take care. Bye.